the Florida legislature just passed a bill changing the entire congressional map of Florida. And some are calling this gerrymandering. So what is it? All right, so what is gerrymandering? There are two forms of gerrymandering that can really happen, right? There's something called packing and there's something called cracking, okay? So when you have packing, this is what you see in a lot of Republican states, right? Because the majorities tend to be a little bit tighter. The urban population tends to be a little bit more concentrated. So you have to pack as many Democrat voters into that state now, or into that district. Now you might think, why do I want my opponent to win a district? Well, because you want them to win one district. So you would rather have them win one district as opposed to possibly three. So when you pack, you want your opponent to win by like 90%, 90-10, 80-10. Now, is this legal? No, not in Florida. But the way to get around that is basically saying we had a massive population increase. We need to redraw these maps because we were gypped a seat. Okay, so that might be part of it. All right, so cracking is what often happens in the Northeast, or primarily in the Northeast in New England, right? So you have about 40% of the Northeast actually still is Republican. However, how many congressional districts in New England? 0 are owned by the Republicans. Why? Because of cracking, right? There's so many cities, there's so many small cities that are up in New England. Boston dominates the East, Lexington dominates the West, and you crack it down the middle, and you kind of allow your representatives to be elected by a comfortable margin, 60%. You want to win as many congressional districts as possible. Okay, so all of the Northeast is run by Democrats because of gerrymandering. Now, why is this important? Because it decides who owns the House in 2026 or going into 2027. So whether Trump is impeached, that's on the docket. Whether anything else gets passed with Homeland Security, that's on the docket. Now, the Republicans have this really big issue. They had a prime opportunity to win, but they suck. So the Republicans were elected with a mandate. Trump was elected with a mandate. Senate, House, Executive. And they decided war instead. So instead of really cracking down, they have this once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity and for the Republicans, but they blow it. Now, Democrats, I'm not a Democrat, but the Democrats would do a lot better, but they suck. So the Democrats kind of try to cover too many policies that are extreme, so to speak, right? So they lump in these, you got these policies that, people can agree on with healthcare and stuff like that. Whether you believe, I don't believe in universal healthcare. However, the Democrats, when they owned the Senate and the House, they came up with Obamacare. Is that good? No, didn't make anybody happy. Now, it was definitely more of a Cloward Piven strategy, where you're basically wanting to break the system more in order to rebuild it into something new. Okay, so the end goal was universal health care with that, but you ended up with Obamacare, okay, and universal mandates and expensive private care or cheap Obamacare. So anyways, who started this, right? First it was Texas. Right, Texas had to redraw its maps. They had a lot of people moving in. They redrew their maps. Trump basically called for it, and so Texas took the lead. Illinois responded with a whacked out map. Maryland is gerrymandered pretty bad. New York tried to respond, but their Supreme Court blocked it for some. I'm not going to argue with that, but so Florida has tried this a couple of times in the past and failed. In 2022 was the last time, but it kind of was redrawn again. And so So here in 2026, with the increased population over since 2020, really, that's the excuse that that DeSantis is using. Okay, that why we have to redraw these maps. Now, is it going to pass the legislature? I don't know. Or sorry, excuse me. Is it going to pass the courts? That's a good question. That really is the ultimate question now. Are they going to pass the courts? There's a good argument that no. However, a lot of the courts have now been replaced, and judges have been reelected in different spots. So it can go either way. Now, one of the biggest problems, though, is how do you prevent gerrymandering? Okay. There's not really a good way to prevent it, because it's a prisoner's dilemma, right? So if you don't gerrymander and somebody else does, then you lose. If you gerrymander and somebody else doesn't, you win. If you both don't gerrymander, that keeps the peace, right? But if you both gerrymander, then you end up with an arms race. So you end up with Texas doing it, Illinois doing it, the Northeast doing it, Florida doing it. And so you basically harden these states into creating as gerrymandered districts as possible. Now, another way to get around this is going to take an act of Congress, but you can go through proportional voting. So there was a law passed in the 1960s that basically prevents states from doing this by a federal mandate. But if Congress repeals it, you could look at something like proportional voting, where you elect your district, or you elect your representatives by proportional votes. So say Florida, forget 30, say 30 has 30 electoral votes, and 30%, 40% vote for Democrat, 60% vote for Republican, then you would split that along party lines, 60-40. The problem is that now you have no party is going to go for that, because it weakens their part in the system. So they lose votes on one side, or they lose votes or they gain votes on the other. Which one would you pick? Obviously, they're going to pick to win, but you have states like Indiana that say, no, we're not going to do it. Okay. Now, if other states do it and you don't, you lose. The Northeast has been gerrymandered for years. The Republicans have always kind of been this wishy-washy, we're not going to do this kind of party. Now they're kind of stepping up a little bit, but all in all, the Republicans still have the problem of not wanting to go as far, because they're basically, a lot of people think they're the controlled opposition, right? They think there's a lot of people that think that Republicans don't go far enough. Obviously, there's the Democrats think they go too far. So you have this dichotomy of voting, whether the Republicans are going to try to go for mass deportation or not, Iran war or not. So the Republicans are completely divided on that, and usually that means nothing happens. So will this affect Congress this year? Probably, because a lot of times judicial districts wait to see the outcomes of elections before they mandate a redrawing of the map. Is that going to happen? Probably. So in 2026, you could come up with completely different congressional districts, and that will change what Congress looks like and possibly save Trump from impeachment. So on that note, thank you for joining me. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell me what you think. Is there another way that you can come up with getting around gerrymandering? I want to hear your thoughts. Thank you for joining me, and see you in the next video.